You read it?
I've read it.
Have you read this?
He's read it.
Let me read it to you.
We've read it.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 iconic news headlines of all time.
It's nice here.
May I read my paper?
I'm sorry, sir.
Thank you.
For this list, we're looking at the most famous, shocking, and creatively written news headlines throughout modern history. Got a favorite here? Tell us in the comments. Number 20. King Elvis Dead. On Wednesday, August 17, 1977, the front page of British tabloid The Sun bore the headline, King Elvis Dead. It also included some uncalled-for additions, like the subtitle, He was 42 and alone, and a photo with the insulting caption, Fat and 40. His overeating made him a tragic sight. But the headline itself both informs and pays respect to the legendary singer, who had been dubbed the King of Rock and Roll. And while the subtitle was unnecessarily blunt, it was true. Elvis did indeed die alone, passing away from heart disease in his bathroom.
The end, at an early age, of one of the two most spectacular careers in the history of American entertainment, the other being Frank Sinatra's.
Number 19. Greatest crash in Wall Street's history. The greatest financial disaster of the century, the Wall Street crash signaled the end of the Roaring '20s and the beginning of the Great Depression. Beginning on September 4, 1929 and lasting to mid-November, the Wall Street crash devastated the world economy.
Hope of an easy retirement, the new home, their children's education, everything was gone.
On Friday, October 25, 1929, the Daily Mail ran a headline that read, Greatest Crash in Wall Street's History. It hauntingly depicted the massive extent of the damage, not to mention the historic nature of the crash itself. It came just one day after Black Thursday, which is generally considered the true start of the crash, owing to the large amount of panic selling. With this headline, people knew the world was spiraling into chaos. Number 18. Young elected city's first black mayor. The 60s and early 70s were a turbulent time in American history, marked by protests and boycotts as the civil rights movement fought against racial discrimination. The city of Detroit was particularly polarized, which is why the mayorship of Coleman Young is so historic. In November of 1973, Young defeated white police commissioner John Nichols to become the first African-American mayor of the city.
There's a new excitement in Detroit generated by the promise and hope of a new mayor. Coleman Young is the city's first black chief executive, elected by a narrow margin. But there are expansive responses to his vow to put Detroit back on its feet and turn around the city's alarming increase of violent crime.
The victory came despite Nichols' attempts to generate fear about black crime in Detroit. On Wednesday, November 7, 1973, the Detroit Free Press ran a headline reading, Young elected city's first black mayor, complete with an image of Young flashing the peace sign. It is a perfect representation of the civil rights movement's positive impact. Number 17. Dewey defeats Truman. The Chicago Daily Tribune ran a succinct but efficient headline on November 3, 1948. It read simply, Dewey defeats Truman, referring to the 1948 election between Republican Thomas Dewey and Democrat Harry Truman. There was just one problem. The headline was wrong. In fact, Truman had defeated Dewey in an upset victory. The Tribune went to press before the results were read, relying on a political analyst to predict the winner.
So it wasn't just the Tribune that was wrong. The pollsters and their scientific sampling methods, they had to be re-evaluated, and not for the last time.
About 150,000 papers were printed with the incorrect headline, one of which made its way into the hands of Truman himself. He then triumphantly displayed the paper in St. Louis Union Station, which of course made it even more notable than it already was. Number 16. So what the hell happens now? On Saturday, June 25, 2016, the Daily Mirror's front page featured Samantha Cameron staring anxiously at her husband, Prime Minister David Cameron. That's because Cameron was resigning. 2 days before the headline was published, Cameron's government had held a referendum on whether Britain should leave the European Union. Disappointing Cameron, 52% voted to leave.
I'm very proud and very honoured to have been Prime Minister of this country for 6 years. I believe we've made great steps. with more people in work than ever before in our history, with reforms to welfare and education, increasing people's life chances, building a bigger and stronger society.
This headache is dramatically summarized in the Daily Mirror's headline. The question it poses is still relevant today as the consequences of Brexit continue to unfold. No one knows what's going to happen, but we are all watching with bated breath.
The deal we got was very, very poor. Very poor. So I probably would change my vote if I'm honest.
Do you feel that the government have let you down?
I think, in a word, yes.
Number 15. Heir to Austria's throne is slain with his wife by a Bosnian youth to avenge seizure of his country. Well, one thing's for sure. Headline writing has gotten a lot better over the years. On June 29, 1914, the New York Times ran this rather bloated headline that heralded horrible things for the world to come. Those not following European politics may have found it uninteresting. The heir in question is Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was killed by Bosnian youth Gavrilo Princip.
He was sentenced to life in prison, but always maintained he was a freedom fighter, not a criminal.
While this event caused great consternation among European royals, everyday citizens found it little more than an exciting and tragic story. Little did they know that it would result in the most destructive war the world had ever seen. Just 1 month later, World War I officially began.
Just a single bullet on the 28th of June 1914 ushered in an age of conflict on a scale unprecedented in history. Never again would people celebrate the declaration of war as they had across Europe in 1914.
Number 14. War. Oahu bombed by Japanese planes. Any headline that starts with the word war does not signal great things for the foreseeable future. This rather horrifying headline was plastered on the front page of the Honolulu Star Bulletin on the morning of Sunday, December 7, 1941. Those reading it must have felt an unbearable feeling of dread, so nightmarish were its connotations. On the morning of that same day, the American naval base at Pearl Harbor had been bombed by Japanese planes, resulting in thousands of casualties.
The legacy of what happened on December 7th still haunts us today.
The very next day, the otherwise neutral United States declared war on Japan and officially entered World War II. Number 13. Time to face the past. On Thursday, April 26, 2018, the Montgomery Advertiser released a rather eye-catching paper. Its front page consisted of a black square with names inside its borders. Also within the square was the headline, Time to Face the Past. Legacy of Lynchings, America's Shameful History of Racial Terror and Justice. The paper was meant to honor those who were killed by violent racist mobs. The paper itself was also apologizing for its role in promulgating said tensions since its founding in 1829. The striking headline coincided with the opening of a Montgomery memorial detailing the area's checkered history with racial violence.
So my hope is that people will leave this space prepared to say, never again can we tolerate racial bias and bigotry anywhere.
Number 12. Beatle John Lennon Slain. On the night of December 8, 1980, John Lennon became the first member of the Beatles to pass, having been assassinated by Mark David Chapman outside his Manhattan apartment. He was just 40 years old.
Witnesses told police Lennon was shot near the door to his apartment building as he and Yoko Ono returned from a recording studio.
On the opposite side of the country, the Los Angeles Times ran the headline, Beatle John Lennon Slain, shot down outside New York apartment. It was succinct and impersonal, but it got the message across. Lennon's death was front-page news across the country, and millions of people from around the world mourned in their own special way. Celebrity deaths always have a certain cultural impact, but Lennon's was unlike any other. The public outpouring of grief was unprecedented. Number 11. Martin King shot to death. The face of the American Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King Jr. was the recipient of much public attention and accolades, including the Nobel Peace Prize. But on the evening of April 4, 1968, King was fatally shot at Memphis's Lorraine Motel by racist fugitive James Earl Ray.
Now, there are mixed reports about his motivations. James Earl Ray was certainly a super racist, but it looks like greed may have also played a factor. Now, Ray was under the impression that he was going to be able to collect bounties from a cabal of rich Southerners for killing Dr. King.
The New York Daily News subsequently ran the headline, "Martin King Shot to Death, Gunned Down in Memphis." It's another impersonal headline, but one that brutally signals the turbulent social and political landscape of late 60s America. The event resulted in widespread public grieving of King, not to mention a significant boost for the civil rights movement. Number 10, Hitler Dead. It's the simplicity of this one that really sells it. After 6 horrible years, World War II and the fight with Germany finally came to an end after Hitler took his own life on April 30th, 1945.
Everybody was waiting to see whether they could hear the shot. And then somebody called out, "I think the time has come."
Rather than running some extravagant headlines rejoicing the end of the war, many newspapers simply ran a variation of Hitler Dead. These headlines appeared in the likes of the Daily Mail, the Daily News, the Salt Lake Tribune, and the New York World Telegram. The simplicity is striking, almost as if the world was too exhausted and downtrodden to celebrate. It's amazing how much emotion and world-altering information can be conveyed in just 2 simple words. Number 9, Nixon Resigns. 2-word headlines have an undeniable power that cannot be matched. They not only convey monumental importance, but also allow an enormous story to speak for itself. In this case, Nixon Resigns tells a reader all they need to know about the biggest news story of the generation. This is the headline found on the front page of the Washington Post, dated Friday, August 9th, 1974. Nixon had resigned the very same day in the midst of the Watergate scandal, becoming the first American president to voluntarily leave office.
In leaving it, I do so with this prayer. May God's grace be with you in all the days ahead.
It was an historic moment, captured in just 2 short but effective words. Number 8. Kennedy is killed by sniper as he rides in car in Dallas. Johnson sworn in on plane. The death of a president will always make for national news, but the assassination of a president is something else entirely. The New York Times ran this foreboding headline on Saturday, November 23, 1963, the day after Kennedy was killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. It's the type of loud headline that immediately catches the attention, not only due to the size of the text, but also due to the amount of information that's packed within. Readers not only learn that Kennedy was killed, but also how and where. It also answers the immediate question of who will be succeeding him.
We do know this. That day marked the end of an era. The end, as a grieving Mrs. Kennedy suggested, of Camelot.
This is more of a mini article than a headline, but such a monumental event raises a lot of questions. Number 7, Mr. President. This headline from the New York Post is simple but oh so regal. Barack Obama made American history on Tuesday, November 4th, 2008, handily defeating Republican John McCain to become the first African-American president.
A century and a half after the Constitution abolished slavery and guaranteed blacks the right to vote, 4 decades after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, voters have chosen our first African-American president.
It's the type of historic moment that headline writers would be chomping at the bit to honor. It indeed inspired tons of creative headlines across the nation, some straightforward, others extravagant. This headline from the New York Post was surprisingly simple, but the proud picture of a smiling Obama mixed with the size of the text creates a celebratory tone befitting the significant moment. Number 6, Diana Dead. On the night of August 31st, 1997, Princess Diana died in a car accident while fleeing the paparazzi in Paris. She was just 36 years old. The public outpouring of grief was immense, and newspapers competed to create the most shocking and eye-catching headline.
A statement issued by the palace says the Queen and the Prince of Wales are deeply shocked and distressed by the terrible news.
A popular British tabloid called News of the World went with the basic but unforgettable Diana Dead. The simple words themselves are effective, but perhaps even more compelling is the size of the text. Those 2 words take up about 3/4 of the entire page, signaling the surprising nature of the death and the enormous impact it would have on the world. Colossal words for a colossal event. Number 5, Mandela Goes Free Today. In the early 1960s, Nelson Mandela fought against apartheid and the South African government by creating Umkhonto weSizwe, an armed wing of the African National Congress. It was labeled a terrorist organization, and Mandela was thrown in prison for life. He ended up serving 27 years and was released by President F.W. de Klerk on February 11, 1990.
That February, after 27 years of imprisonment, Nelson Mandela walked to freedom with his then-wife Winnie at his side. Worldwide pressure had borne fruit.
To commemorate this event, the South African newspaper City Press ran the victorious headline, "Mandela Goes Free Today." It's straightforward but beautiful, heralding the end of apartheid and the beginnings of Mandela's historic political career as the first president of South Africa. Number 4. War on America. 9/11 is the type of moment that inspires a range of headlines, trying to come to grips with tragedy.
I definitely have friends who have been lost, and it's very sad, and I don't know what's going to happen.
But perhaps one of the most effective front pages was the one belonging to Britain's The Daily Telegraph. It read simply, "War on America," with an accompanying photo that spoke louder and clearer than any words possibly could. Contrasting against a blue sky was the horrifying sight of an exploding tower and debris raining onto the ground below. This combination of headline and photo hauntingly depicted the surreal events of that fateful September morning. Not to mention the foreboding questions the future held. Number 3. The First Footstep. History was made at 2:56 Coordinated Universal Time on July 21, 1969. It was at that moment that American astronaut Neil Armstrong stepped foot on the moon. Even today, it's widely considered one of the greatest scientific and engineering feats of all time, maybe even the greatest.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The London newspaper Evening Standard depicted a reconstruction of the lunar module aided by the headline, "The First Footstep." It's a gorgeously poetic headline, with 3 simple words encompassing the unbelievable accomplishment. It celebrates ambition, creativity, and ingenuity, and it's everything a great headline should be. Number 2. Titanic sinks 4 hours after hitting iceberg. On the morning of Tuesday, April 16, 1912, people woke up to this horrible headline. The front page of the New York Times displayed a picture of the gigantic ship, along with the haunting and protracted headline, "Titanic sinks 4 hours after hitting iceberg. 866 rescued by Carpathia. Probably 1,250 perish. Is May safe? Mrs. Astor, maybe. Noted names missing." It's a tantalizing headline for what it represents about early 20th century America. The information was wrong, as approximately 1,500 died in the sinking, not 1,250. It also included details about the elite, including White Star Line chairman J. Bruce Ismay and the wife of John Astor, who was the richest man on the ship. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Peace. What better way to signal the end of World War II than with one simple word? The word peace, complete with an exclamation mark, was plastered across the front page of Sydney's The Sun on the morning of August 15, 1945. This day marked Japan's surrender, and the war officially came to an end when the surrender document was signed on September 2nd.
Let us pray that peace be now restored to the world and that God will preserve it always.
It's rare that newspaper headlines display emotion, but this world-changing event called for it. The word itself covers much of the front page, and the exclamation mark serves as a nice addition to convey the elation of the event. This exuberant headline matches the enthusiastic energy that millions were feeling at the time. Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.